The people who've been saying this stuff for decades are suddenly ahead of everyone else. There's no more denying it. It's time to do your due diligence. It's time to actually look into this. And for everyone who spent years doubting them, now's your chance to help shine a light on the darkness. I'll have the EFTA numbers on your screen so you can look it up yourself. What's actually in there is worse than the noise.
I suspect that the DOJ was not very interested in making them very accessible, as noted by them not giving us zip downloads to even download them with this time. So trying to make them more accessible for myself and others.
Can I suggest a thread, for a younger, more energetic man to follow up on?
Absolutely.
And that's fixation on genetics and biotechnology.
Yeah.
And it's very clear to me, well, much is not clear to me at all, and I don't understand this category very well. I'm not a scientist or geneticist, but I have noticed, not just with Epstein, but with a bunch of people in Epstein's orbit, there is a fixation on genetics and changing genetics and improving people and cloning and
on
really
eugenics.
Kind of tampering with the material of life in a way that someone who believed he was God would, or someone who's involved in the supernatural would. I mean, there's really heavy stuff here, and that really, really matters. And I have not seen anybody go into that in a methodical way.
Here's a story everyone has. Epstein told scientists he wanted to seed the human race with his DNA. He had a ranch in New Mexico where the plan was to impregnate 20 women at a time. George Church, Harvard's top CRISPR gene editing pioneer, had regular documented meetings with him. A victim wrote in her own words, quote, "I'm not your personal incubator." In 30 23andMe DNA kits were shipped to Dubai for a Middle Eastern royal. And that's where every outlet stopped. The victim diary got picked up by the tabloids, the 23andMe kits got a couple paragraphs in SFgate, and then everyone moved on to the next celebrity name. Everyone is asking who was in Epstein's circle, but nobody's asking what he was building. When you read these documents, the actual EFTA files, not the headlines, a pattern emerges. Shell companies declaring DNA analysis as their business activity. $50,000 wired to an artificial intelligence institute. A male fertility specialist getting haircuts at the residence. Then there are these meetings called designer babies, 6 days before meetings with the egg people. A woman flown from Manchester, England, and referred to a fertility clinic. This seems to be an operation. Infrastructure, funding, scientists, and victims who knew. So let's just go through the documents. This is a Deutsche Bank Know Your Customer form for a company called Southern Trust Company Incorporated, registered in the U.S. Virgin Islands, sole owner and president, Jeffrey E. Epstein. DNA analysis. That's what Epstein told his bank that his company does. Expected quarterly revenue, $12.5 million. Annual income, $10 million. So, I went looking for what Southern Trust actually did. Nothing. No lab, no research, no scientist on payroll. The actual operations were pure investment management. Venezuelan government bonds, derivatives, Epstein's personal salary. The company was originally called Financial Informatics Incorporated. DNA analysis was a fiction, a qualifying business activity for USVI tax incentives. Now follow the money. The Cook Foundation, that's one of Epstein's nonprofits, wires $50,000 to the Singularity Institute for Artificial Intelligence. That's now called MIRI, the organization dedicated to building artificial general intelligence. EFTA 01500847. Nobody has ever reported this wire. $20,000 to the Worldwide Transhumanist Association. $100,000 to Ben Goertzel, one of the leading AGI researchers on the planet. A $200,000 invoice for Joseph Thackeray, a researcher George Church introduced to Epstein who was editing his own stem cells with CRISPR. $6.5 million to Harvard's program for evolutionary dynamics. Genetics, artificial intelligence, transhumanism, life extension, CRISPR gene editing. He funded all of it. And that's just the science side. So I kept digging. A master transaction ledger, 21 transactions from 2013 through 2018. Leon Black, the head of Apollo Management, one of the largest private equity funds on Earth, sends over $120 million through Epstein's Southern Trust Company. That money routes to Edmond de Rothschild Bank in Geneva. $10 million goes directly to Benjamin Edmond de Rothschild personally, and in the same ledger, Southern Trust is investing in Peter Thiel's Valor Venture funds. Epstein was the financial intermediary routing $167 million between one of Wall Street's largest PE funds, a European private bank, and Silicon Valley's most connected venture capitalist. And his cover story for all of it? DNA analysis. Then there's this. A complete investor pitch deck from a San Francisco biotech venture capital fund called Descartes Capital, found in Epstein's seized files. The fund explicitly targets Russian oligarch money. Their portfolio is gene therapy using engineered viruses, transgenic chicken bioreactors, meaning they insert human genes into animal germ cells, cancer immunotherapy. A Princeton molecular biology professor is on the advisory board. Descartes Capital returns 0 results connected to Epstein anywhere. No news article, no Reddit thread, nothing on YouTube. And then there's BioAlibi LLC. I'm not exactly sure how it's pronounced. But essentially, Christina Galbraith previously worked for Epstein's foundation. By January 2019, she'd become the director of genetic therapies at a company called BioAlibi. It might be pronounced BioAlib, but again, I'm not sure. She published on genetic vectors, and she asked to keep using the foundation's Lexington Avenue office space. BioAlib LLC returns 0 results on the open web. A genetics company that doesn't exist publicly, run by an Epstein Foundation employee working on genetic vectors out of his office? EFTA 02278036. Now this one should make you stop. In Epstein's files, there are investment research documents about Editas Medicine, a CRISPR gene editing company. Standard financial analysis. But look at what's in it. These are the only documents in 44,000 files that contain the word germline. That means editing DNA that gets passed down to future generations. Heritable genetic modification. Gene editing research about permanently modifying human embryos sitting in the seized evidence of a convicted sex trafficker. Ask yourself why that was in his files. One more. A file called traitsandappearance.xls. An Excel spreadsheet about human traits and physical appearance created by Curtis Marine, a researcher at Arizona State University's Institute of Human Origins, for a workshop called Human Uniqueness and Behavior Modernity. It was forwarded through the physicist Lawrence Krauss to Epstein. Then, Epstein forwarded it to Jess Daly, head of JP Morgan's investment bank. And he added a line, "Your daughter is also invited too." Okay, hold up. A spreadsheet cataloging human traits and appearance forwarded it to one of Wall Street's most powerful bankers with an invitation that included his daughter. Let's continue. If you're going to run a genetics program, you need access to a genetics lab. Epstein didn't just fund Harvard's program for evolutionary dynamics. He had his own key card. September 2017, Mei Huang, a PhD staff member, emails Epstein's assistant. The card reader system at Martin Novak's Institute had been changed. She needed an address to mail Jeffrey a new access card. So they mailed it to his home, 9 East 71st Street, New York. When the system changed again, instructions were sent for how to get to the 6th floor. That means Epstein had permanent, unsupervised building access to Harvard's Genetics Research Institute. And when the locks changed, staff sent him new keys. And he used that access. In the files, I found complete schedules for day-long private meetings at Harvard, back-to-back, all in one building, with some very important people. May 6th, 2018, 10:15 a.m., Martin Novak, the head of the program for evolutionary dynamics, 11:30 to 3, Joy Ito and a group from MIT including Caleb Harper from Open Agriculture. 3 p.m., Yo Shabak, the AI and consciousness researcher. 4 p.m., Leonid Peshkin. Okay, so this Peshkin guy, Harvard researcher in developmental biology and single-cell genomics, embryonic development, Epstein asked for him by name. Nobody has ever reported on Leonid Peshkin's involvement. And then dinner at 6 with Larry Summers, former Treasury Secretary of the United States, at Martin Novak's Institute. Why? 5 months later, October 15th, same pattern. Novak at 11:30, then at 12:30, Kamila Naxarova, Massachusetts General Hospital, Harvard Medical School, cancer genetics, studies tumor evolution at the single-cell level. Nobody has reported on her either. 2 p.m., John de la Parra from MIT Open Agriculture. 3:30, Yo Shabak again. 5:30, snacks with Larry Summers. 7 p.m., dinner with Joy Ito. The same people, genetics, AI, consciousness, former Treasury Secretary, one building, one day, organized by a convicted sex offender with his own key card. If you're running a reproductive operation, you need a doctor. Meet Harry Fish. Harry Fish is one of America's leading urologists. His specialty is male reproductive health, sperm quality, fertility optimization, testosterone. He has 606 appearances in the Epstein documents, $2,800 in urology invoices, home visits at Epstein's residence on the same day the calendar reads 10 Harry Fish, 11:30 Leon, 2:30 Deepak, 3:30 Woody. That's Leon Black, Deepak Chopra, Woody Allen. But Fish wasn't just his doctor. It would seem he was inner circle. They had lunch at the 2nd Avenue Deli where Fish sent him a Wall Street Journal article about female Viagra. Fish got haircuts from Epstein's personal barber at the residence. He attended a Woody Allen movie screening alongside Karina Shiliak. And for Christmas, Epstein sent him an Apple Watch. And then a reminder call in May 2019, 6 weeks before Epstein's arrest. So it would seem he was inner circle, and Fish, his specialty, is the exact thing you would need for a reproductive operation. And Fish wasn't the only one. In September 2018, Epstein saw a second urologist, Darius Paduch, Cornell Medical. And Monday the 24th, he sees Fish. Wednesday the 26th, he sees Paduch. Paduch's staff asked for the reason for the visit, but Epstein's office never answered. There's a note in the files that says, "Ask Dr. Fish." That's a cross-referral between the two urologists, with Epstein's office controlling the information. A few days later, Epstein's staff is frantically chasing blood test results. October 2nd through 4th, 3 days of calls trying to get results from Paduch's office. Keep in mind that Darius Paduch has since been convicted of sexually abusing his patients, including minors. Nobody has ever connected these two stories. Epstein's reproductive medicine specialist and his convicted abuser urologist seeing the same patient in the same week, cross-referring through Epstein's office. August 2018. Watch how fast this moves. August 2nd, a meeting called Designer Babies. Brian Bishop, biohacker, CRISPR advocate. The meeting uses a pre-existing video room. The URL is Tax Master Genetics. That name already existed. That means these discussions had been happening. 3 days later, August 5th, Bishop puts the pitch in writing. The subject line is Designer Babies, and his goal, in his own words, the first live birth of a human designer baby, and possibly a human clone, within 5 years. The budget was $1.7 million a year for up to 5 years, plus $1 million for a lab setup. The plan was transgenic mice first, then human volunteers. And the intended outcome? The first human with transgenic sperm, and we begin taking pre-orders. Pre-orders? for genetically modified humans. Epstein's response? I have no issues with investing. The problem is only if I am seen to lead. So he wanted in, he just didn't want his name on it. And Bishop knew that. In the same thread he writes, anonymity requirements about babies. We can't publicly identify whose these are or their parents or benefactors. It would brand the child as, essentially, and sadly, a freak for life in the media. He then offers to run the whole thing under his own project so Epstein has, his words, a sufficient level of deniability. There it is. By August 13th, Bishop sent a follow-up. He was already running experiments. Quote, proceeding with more mouse testing at my Ukraine lab. Surgeries, microinjection. The lab was at the Institute of Gerontology at Ukraine's Academy of Medical Sciences in Kiev. A real lab with real experiments. Real animals being cut open and injected with modified genetic material. This is starting to look like a cloning program and a billionaire funder who wanted to stay invisible. August 8th. David Mitchell, Epstein's fixer, sends an email. Jeffrey wanted to set up a meeting with the egg people. And the staff replies, ha, egg people. August 9th, 7:30 a.m. The egg people meeting happens at 9 East 71st Street. By 11, Brad Karp is there, one of the top litigation lawyers in the country. By 1:15, lunch with Leon Black. August 20th, a woman is flown from Manchester, England to New York. September 9th, Epstein personally directs his staff. Find her a gynecologist in Manchester. September 2018, staff recommends Manchester Fertility Clinic. Okay, so 6 days between a designer babies meeting and an egg people meeting, 11 days later, a woman flown internationally and referred to a fertility clinic. Nobody has reported on the egg people term, not even a single news article. Now we go international. So CNBC just ran a piece on Epstein's Silicon Valley connections. They confirmed Anne Wojcicki, the founder of 23andMe, was connected to Epstein. A victim alleged that she met Wojcicki on Epstein's island. CNBC reported that and moved on, but they didn't mention this. That's Epstein's own email, misspellings and all. Rashid Epstein, a fake identity created to register a DNA kit for Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the ruler of Dubai. His assistant, Leslie Groff, follows up. We can register a kit for you as Rashid Epstein. The kits go to JFK Terminal 4, Door 5, onto Emirates Flight 202 to Dubai. When 23andMe invalidates them for geographic restrictions, Sultan proposes a workaround. Collect the DNA in Dubai, mail the samples to New York. This seems to be a covert DNA collection operation using a fraudulent identity run through household staff for Middle Eastern royalty? And here's what ties it all together. March 2014, John Brockman, who runs the Edge Foundation, sends out invitations for a dinner in Vancouver. The guest list: Jeff Bezos, Sergey Brin, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Larry Page, and the two names that matter for this story, Jeffrey Epstein and Anne Wojcicki. Anne Wojcicki, the founder of 23andMe, the same company whose DNA kits Epstein registered under a fake name and shipped to Dubai royalty. CNBC had access to the same documents I did. They confirmed Wojcicki was connected to Epstein, and they left all of this on the table. Read the article. Every name gets the same treatment. Thiel, legal and legitimate purposes. Hoffman, philanthropic purposes. Gates, absolutely absurd and completely false. Brin, no comment. The article mentions zero genetics, zero DNA, zero reproductive programs, zero CRISPR. The words baby, fertility, and gene don't appear once. That's not journalism. That's damage control for Silicon Valley. They wrote the version of the story that protects the people in it. Now, Bill Gates. 3 days ago, the Wall Street Journal published an article called how Epstein inserted himself in a split between Bill Gates and a top Gates advisor. They reported that in 2013, Epstein jumped into negotiations between Gates and his science advisor, Boris Nikolic. That Epstein wrote fake resignation letters to himself as leverage, that he dangled allegations about Gates' extramarital affairs, and that Gates himself said, quote, "Jeffrey was quite helpful. Without him, it would have been harder," end quote. So what is the Wall Street Journal's angle here? While sure, they are going deep by revealing this, but it seems like their angle is Epstein was a manipulator who exploited a business split. And that's true, but that's where they stopped. They never asked the obvious question. Why would a convicted sex trafficker care about a biotech fund separation? Everyone knows Gates and Epstein met, but nobody really knows why. Look at this document. A draft separation agreement between Boris Nikolic and Bill Gates. Nikolic was Gates' science advisor, one of his closest. The agreement says they won't disparage each other, they'll keep it confidential, employment ends January 1st, 2014. But this document was sent to Jeffrey Epstein for input. A confidential employment separation between Bill Gates and his science advisor, and Epstein was the one being consulted? Why? Nikolic emailed Epstein directly about the terms. In addition to changing date to the end of January, the last point need to total change, helping me find a job. He was negotiating his exit from Bill Gates through Jeffrey Epstein. Boris Nikolic was later named in Epstein's will as alternate executor. 124 documents connect them in the corpus. Epstein wasn't just socially connected to Gates. He was brokering confidential employment separations for Gates' closest science advisors. Nikolic is the bridge figure. Everything I've shown you so far is infrastructure, shell companies, wire transfers, meeting calendars, key cards, documents. But the files contain something else. This is a letter written by a victim addressed directly to Jeffrey Epstein. This is scary. Let me show you what this document is. Your body has never been given time to properly heal. Where is my baby? Where is Jelaine? I am not your personal incubator. She knew she was being used for reproduction and she said it directly. But that's actually just the surface. This is about to blow your mind. So I'm sure you've been seeing the incubator stuff in the news recently. It's been covered, but they're not really explaining it. This is what they didn't tell you. This victim didn't write that letter in English. She wrote it in rail fence cipher. A rail fence cipher is a transposition code. You split your message across 2 rows, alternating letters. Top, bottom, top, bottom. To read it, you weave the rows back together. The actual page in the EFTA is not the journal. It's rows of letters that look like occult nonsense. But what I just read you, I'm not your personal incubator, where is the baby, where is Jelaine? That's what you get once you decode it. It would seem that the DOJ apparently had cryptanalysts decode it, and then they added this plain text translation to the file. But they don't clarify at all that it was a cipher. They just published the decoded letter like she wrote it normally. And they left out that the cipher ends with death. See, you're missing the context. The real question is, why does a trafficking victim know how to write in cipher? Why would she need to? A rail fence cipher isn't something you just pick up. Someone most likely taught her this. That's a red flag. A victim writing in code implies training and operation. This reads like ritual abuse more than anything else. All the ciphers were decoded. One of them mentions the blood from supposedly Leon Black. We've mentioned him several times. The other cipher is her guilt. She feels like a monster. She remembers the screams. But I was looking through the PDF and I found this page. It's like a bunch of stickers or cutouts, and there's one that says "Protect the Vanishing," and this victim wrote "children." The vanishing children? What is she talking about? What's crazy is there's a whole nother PDF, and that too has a bunch of ciphers. Now let me show you really quick, because I can't explain it all, but you just need to see it. I'm sure most of you remember when this all came out, but here's the thing. We had zero context. Think about what I'm telling you right now and how this all connects. Look at these ciphers. Look at her cutouts. This is no normal victim. She describes a forced medical procedure. Quote, "Close your eyes, close your eyes, close your eyes. Don't speak. She doesn't talk." A shot in rod-like instruments with a hook, consistent with a D&C procedure. Apparently the doctor was from Israel. Ghislaine Maxwell was present and directing. A decision was made, but I can't tell Jeffrey. Maxwell was making reproductive decisions Epstein didn't even know about. This victim was impregnated, carried to term, and her baby was born alive. She even names Jean-Luc Brunel directly. Quote, "Jean-Luc Brunel is a disgusting pig." She says she was sent back after 6 weeks. Quote, "Punishment for trying to run." Right there, that's the reason for the ciphers. And here's a line that ties everything together. The superior gene pool? Why me? Why my hair color and eye color? That feels very Nazi-like. She says the piano and music comments we made to convince her this is right and will create perfect offspring. At first I thought that sounded like hypnotism, but it seems like they were trying to teach her to play the instrument. Quote, "I miss the person I was before I was made into what feels as a human incubator." Okay, so this is a metaphor. She seems to be describing a eugenics program, and we've been tracing this through the documents. George Church, egg people, CRISPR, designer babies. And here's a girl saying they selected her for her hair color and eye color to create perfect offspring. She called it Nazi-like. And like I said, look at these stickers or cutouts and how the ciphers are under them. She's spelling it out for you. And look at this. "Help me, please. Can't anyone find me?" I saved this one for last because it connects everything. December 2nd, 2018. A Harvard lunch at Martin Novak's Institute. The guest, George Church, Harvard's top CRISPR pioneer. Seth Lloyd, MIT quantum computing, Martin Novak, and a woman. She had just flown in from Paris. She needed a US cell phone, and she wasn't American. Now look at this email. Epstein directing his staff on travel routes. Same as last time. Kyiv to Paris, Moscow to Paris, St. Petersburg to Paris, Odessa to Paris, all converging on his apartment at 22 Avenue, Foch in Paris. It would seem that apartment was the hub for the Eastern European trafficking pipeline. Women from Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, routed through Paris. Same as last time means this was a reoccurring operation with established routes. So why was a woman from that pipeline at a Harvard genetics lunch with the world's leading CRISPR researcher? Everything that I've shown you so far has been the documents. I haven't made a single claim. I haven't accused anyone of anything. What follows is what I think this means. You can disagree, you can turn off the video, but if you made it this far, I think you need to hear this. When you lay out all these documents, 3 layers emerge. Layer 1, the personal predation. This is the story everyone already knows. The massages, the girls, the island. Epstein was a predator. That's the version that went to trial, and that's where most people stopped. Layer 2, blackmail. Cameras in every room, every bedroom, every bathroom, every property. When you have the most powerful people on earth walking through your doors, and you have footage of what they do behind the closed ones, you don't need money. You have leverage. That's the intelligence operation. Layer 3, the genetics pipeline. And this is what no one is talking about. It would seem that the trafficking wasn't just predation, it was a supply chain. The victims weren't just being exploited, they're being harvested. Eggs extracted, menstrual cycles tracked, fertility clinics arranged, babies taken. And a victim literally wrote, "I'm not your personal incubator." She's describing her function in the operation. But there's one thing that everyone is missing. Why Silicon Valley? Everyone keeps asking why Epstein was connected to tech billionaires. The answer isn't that they were donors. But what if their companies are the infrastructure? 23andMe, genetic profiles on millions of people. That's the training data. Palantir, pattern recognition across massive datasets. That's the trait selection engine. Microsoft, cloud computing and AI processing power. That's the computational backbone for processing genomic data. George Church in CRISPR, that's the editing tool. Once the AI identifies what to change, Church's lab can change it. Oil money can write checks. Only Silicon Valley owns AI, big data, and genetic databases. They're not funding the operation, they are the operation. Now keep in mind, this is all theoretical. I am interpreting public documents, but the infrastructure is real, the companies are real, and the connections between them are in the files. And if this theory is correct, it doesn't stop at production. These aren't just designer babies. It monitors the human. Palantir isn't just analyzing genetic data on the front end. It's a surveillance infrastructure that tracks populations on the back end. What am I saying? It would seem that these sickos are trying to design an engineered human race that's powered and monitored by AI. Design them, produce them, monitor them, control them, all in AI. That's why I called this video AI Baby Farms. It's not just baby farms. If you follow the documents to their logical conclusion, what you're looking at isn't just a trafficking operation. It's the blueprint for an AI-monitored, engineered population. Allegedly. And remember what I told you at the beginning of the video. Epstein told scientists he wanted to see the human race with his DNA. He wanted to impregnate 20 women at a time at his ranch in New Mexico. Everyone reported that like it was just fantasy, like it was some delusion of a narcissist. But look at what I just showed you. The shell companies, the fertility doctors, the egg harvesting, the CRISPR research, the AI funding. It seems like he was describing this operation. That is the full picture as I understand it, but that's just from 44,000 documents. Every EFTA number has been on your screen, so you can verify everything I've shown you. Now, the story doesn't end here. The documents speak for themselves, but if you want to understand why I called this video what I called it, stay here for 5 more minutes, because none of this is new. This has been happening for almost 300 years. In 1739, the Foundling Hospital opened in London, and it was funded by royalty, supported by aristocrats. And if you look at the coat of arms, there's the Diana of Ephesus, the multi-breasted ancient fertility goddess. But if you look closely, those aren't breasts, they're eggs. Right there on the official seal of a children's hospital. Why do you have occult symbolism on something that's supposed to be a charity? And what about in America? Well, there's a fraternal order that many have never heard of. They're called the Odd Fellows. Similar to Freemasons, but with a completely different purpose. Funded by royalty, their symbols include the all-seeing eye, the fasces, skull and bones, and they were the ones that ran the orphanages in America in the 19th century. They ran the asylums. Their founder, Thomas Wildey, was himself an orphan. Orphans grooming the next generation of orphans. And they did all of this under the name of philanthropy? There are thousands of postcards from the 1890s to the 1910s that nobody talks about. They show babies being grown in cabbage patches, babies being harvested from gardens, babies arriving on trains, babies being pulled from water with hooks and nets, and some that literally say in French, "Nous sommes à vendre," we are for sale. These aren't art projects, these aren't cute jokes. There are thousands of these across Europe and America, and they depict a production line, a repopulation operation. The woman in the red is their handler. The men in the top hats pay for them. Familiar, right? This is the real history behind the Cabbage Patch Kids, and it's even in their lore. A story about babies being grown in a garden, delivered by a stork in uniform, while an evil witch tries to enslave them for labor. Nobody really ever questioned where that story came from. In 1881, a French doctor attached to a foundling hospital built the first baby incubator. He modeled it on a chicken hatchery. Within a decade, baby incubators filled with live premature infants were exhibited at world's fairs across Europe and America. The medical journal that covered it wrote, quote, "It is just as essential in raising men and women as it is raising any kind of stock," end quote. And in 1896, at the same Paris World Fair that showcased those incubators, the first narrative film ever made premiered, Le Fée aux Choux, The Fairy of the Cabbages, a woman pulling babies from a cabbage patch and handing them to couples who pay a farmer. The first movie ever made was about selling babies, and it was created to promote the incubators. Then came the trains. Between 1854 and 1929, over 200,000 children were loaded onto orphan trains and shipped from East Coast cities to the Midwest and West. 72% of them had at least one living parent. They weren't orphans, they were taken. Their names were changed, their records destroyed. They were displayed at train stations and then chosen by families. And then we're just told to forget everything about where they come from. So to put that together, foundling hospitals funded by elite with fertility goddesses on their seals, a secret fraternity running the orphanages, thousands of postcards advertising babies for sale, incubators modeled on chicken hatcheries at world fairs, the first movie ever made is about producing and selling babies, and 200,000 children were shipped across the continent with their identities erased? Now look at what I just showed you in these documents. Shell companies declaring DNA analysis, CRISPR gene editing, fertility doctors, egg harvesting, AI processing, forced pregnancies, babies taken, women trafficked through international pipelines and brought to genetics meetings, and $167 million routed through one man's shell company to a Rothschild bank? The same banking dynasty that's been at the center of European finance since the foundling hospitals were built. The same operation, different century. The only thing that changed is the technology. Okay, so I showed you what I found, but that was just from 44,000 documents in the database that I was using. There are 3.5 million pages in the full DOJ release. What I showed you today is just what one person found in 1 week. There's so much more, and there are a lot of open threads. What if I told you that Epstein wasn't just connected to secret societies, he was in them? That he had real esoteric knowledge? That he was a part of a 158-year-old secret society that most people have never heard of, and he even wanted to start his own? Get ready. This is an email from Epstein's files, and keep in mind, at this point he's already been convicted. Someone in his circle is sending him this. Suggestions for an old guy, super smart, well connected, that wants to continue legacy of old school secret society. Continue the legacy, not start one, continue one, an old school secret society. The same month, this comes in. Just got a note from Bob Pixie. Zodiac is one of the really cool ones. 12 members, still very secret. Dinners in exotic locations. Okay, so I looked into the Zodiac Club. This is real, founded in 1868 in Manhattan. only 12 members at any time. Each one gets assigned a zodiac sign: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and you only get replaced when someone dies. And this members list is pretty crazy. JP Morgan was Brother Libra in 1903. Bob Pyrie ran Rothschilds Incorporated, the American arm of the Rothschild banking dynasty. Paul Volcker, the chairman of the Federal Reserve. So Epstein's circle was being consulted on nominating Murray Gell-Mann, a Nobel Prize winning physicist, for membership. But it gets crazy because in 1910, a group of men traveled in secret to Jekyll Island. They used fake names, told the press they were going duck hunting, but what they were actually doing was writing the blueprint for what became the Federal Reserve, the central bank of the United States. And at least 2 of those men were members of the Zodiac Club. So, you have a secret society that's been around for 158 years, whose members include the Rothschilds, the architect of the Federal Reserve, JP Morgan, and Jeffrey Epstein got an invitation? And Rothschild isn't just a name that shows up once. Ariane de Rothschild had scheduled meetings with Epstein in New York. Jacob Rothschild was forwarding messages through her. Epstein was sending gifts to Alice de Rothschild at NYU. There's even an email to Peter Thiel that says, quote, "As you probably know, I represent the Rothschilds." That's just sitting in the files. And it doesn't stop at the Zodiac Club. This is in Epstein's own bio. He wrote this himself. Former member of the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations. If you're not familiar, the Trilateral Commission was founded by David Rockefeller in 1973. About 390 members from North America, Europe, and Asia. The Council on Foreign Relations is probably the most powerful foreign policy organization in the United States. And Epstein listed membership in both on his own resume. And then you have Ghislaine Maxwell casually emailing, "I'm coming in for the trilateral meetings. We can coordinate some trouble." Coordinate some trouble? On top of that, Peter Mandelson, one of the most powerful politicians in Britain, is emailing Epstein directly. There are plane rides to Bilderberg meetings in the files. So just to be clear, this is where we are. Zodiac Club, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, Bilderberg, all of it documented in his own files and some of it on his own resume. But it goes deeper than this. When I started looking at how this network actually operated internally, there was a whole hierarchy. Look at this. I was told by my inner circle not to have any communication with him, and if I did, I would be in deep trouble. Think about that. Someone was told by the inner circle, not by Epstein personally, by the inner circle, that they couldn't talk to someone, and if they did, they'd be in deep trouble. Another email. Mike was a part of our inner circle. And when someone made an unauthorized introduction into the network, brought someone in without permission, Epstein was furious. My inner circle putting me at risk? There were even access codes. This email literally instructs someone on how to get past a gate. That was the credential for getting to Reid Hoffman, friend of the first circle. Inner circle, first circle, initiates. If you know anything about the history of fraternal orders and secret societies, this is exactly how they operate. And then I found this email thread from June 2011. This ties it all together. It's between Epstein and a woman named Marina, who's writing from Istanbul. And Epstein says, trying to build the 4 levels of Topkapi ideas, initiates, favorites, beliefs, principles. Topkapi Palace, that's the Ottoman Sultan's residence. The Topkapi harem had a formal hierarchy: novice, trainee, favorite, chief consort. And Epstein is designing his own version of that. 4 levels with names. And Marina responds, "By the way, what are the levels at Jeffrey's harem?" She's asking about the levels like it's an existing system, like everyone knows about it. And Epstein responds by quoting Mozart's opera, "The abduction from the Sarajevo which is literally an opera about women held captive in a harem. The harem meant protection for those inside from those outside. That's the same language secret societies have used for centuries. Protection for the initiated. Let's keep going. On top of that, someone sent Epstein a Bohemian Grove documentary with a note, "So I thought of you." And it goes deeper. Moritz Skaugen, a Norwegian shipping magnate in Epstein's network, emails Epstein from Singapore. EFTA 018774737. "Greetings from Singapore. On my way to California to try to understand about the people at the Bohemian Grove." So it's not just a documentary. He's flying to California to investigate the Bohemian Grove and reporting back to Epstein? Epstein donated $50,000 to the Order of the Golden Sphinx Gala, another secret order. The Circle of the Inter-Alliance, a Paris elite club? It's in his emails. Okay, Zodiac Club, Trilateral, Bohemian Grove, Golden Sphinx, Circle of the Inter-Alliance. A 4-level initiation system modeled on an Ottoman harem and an inner circle with access codes and consequences for breaking rank. This wasn't a guy who went to a couple of fancy dinners. He was collecting these things. And he named it EFTA 01613019, an iMessage from 2017. Epstein is discussing who should be brought into his network. Bill Hyman, former DARPA head, Jeffrey Ling, Ed Boyden from MIT Neuroscience. Both are welcome to our secret society. They will join Joy Ito, Ed Boyden, and Caleb. So Joy Ito is in the secret society? Our secret society. That's what he called it. His network of MIT, DARPA, and Gates Foundation connections. And it's not metaphorical. He literally typed it. But the thing is, if you look at this text chain, the person texting Epstein, the DOJ redacted their name. Every message, the sender's blacked out. But if you read it, you can figure out who it is. The sender says Jeffrey Ling, former head of DARPA, is, quote, "a very, very good friend of mine. He tried to make me work at DARPA. They say they're in Seattle with BG, Bill Gates, through April 29th. They name Mark Suzman and Jeff Lamb, Gates Foundation leadership, calling them old guard gargoyles refusing to let other opinions in. Basically, this is advice on how Gates should handle Trump. They tell Epstein that both of them had advised BG to pick a topic and make a deal, quote, something quid pro quo. And Jeffrey Ling isn't just some random person. Do you guys know who this is? He founded DARPA's Biological Technologies Office, the division that builds brain-computer interfaces. So this MW calls this guy a total genius who knows how to make science fiction science fact. And Epstein's response? Both are welcome to our secret society. This is most likely Melanie Walker, Gates Foundation executive, World Economic Forum agenda contributor, and former DARPA advisor. Why is she trying to recruit people into a secret society? And then there's this, EFTA 01903035. March 2013, Epstein writes to Boris Nikolic, Bill Gates' personal science advisor. It's about what he calls uncensored comments about the Giving Pledge. The Giving Pledge, Gates and Buffett's initiative where billionaires commit to giving away most of their wealth. And Epstein proposes turning it into a secret fraternity. The actual initiation ceremony is shrouded in mystery. It may take several hours and involve chanting, robes, blindfolds, and candlelight. The pledge will be initiated into the secrets of the fraternity. From secret mottos and grips to passwords and the meaning behind rituals, he will be sworn to secrecy. Why not follow the Giving Pledge with an initiation into the most select group? Yeah, we're here, guys. Sworn to secrecy. He wanted to build a secret society out of the world's richest people, and he sent it to the man who advised Bill Gates on science. Then there's Brock Pierce, crypto pioneer, Former child actor with his own allegations. EFTA 026200047. October 2018. Pierce and Epstein are texting about visiting Little St. James, and Pierce casually mentions where he lives. Sure thing. I live in the first Masonic temple built in the New World, 250 Calle de Cristo, in San Juan, Puerto Rico. That's his house, and he's planning trips to Epstein's Island from it. David Hansen. You might not know his name, but you know his work. Creator of Sophia, the world's most famous humanoid robot, the one that went viral, the one that got citizenship in Saudi Arabia. David Hansen is all over the Epstein archive. January 2013. Ben Goertzel, one of the world's leading AI researchers, sends this email to Epstein and Hansen. I was talking to Jeffrey Epstein today, and he's potentially interested in having you make him a custom humanoid robot for him. He's been talking to you about you potentially funding our joint AGI robotics research efforts, as well as about him sculpting a Robo Epstein for you. That would be awesome. A Robo Epstein? A humanoid robot in Epstein's own image? Hansen sent Epstein a 6-page white paper for something called the Genie Lab. $84,000 a month, $3 million over 36 months. The research included mind uploading, quote, using AI in large datasets to create functional portraits of existing personalities. But here's what's on Hansen's CV, the same CV that was in Epstein's files. Page 10. OTO active 2010 to present. That's Aleister Crowley's occult order. Now look, on its own, being a part of the OTO isn't weird. It's an active worldwide organization. A lot of artists and academics are into it. Same with Kabbalah. Same with ceremonial magic. None of that is a crime. But when you keep reading the CV, page 7, there's a 1995 art project. Kabbalah Labyrinth with Nodes of Sensual Delight. Page 10, a 1993 symposium. Miracles and Monstrosities. Genetically Engineered Art. And Hansen's relationship with Epstein wasn't brief. Skype calls through 2017. In May 2018, 8 months before Epstein's final arrest, someone wrote, "Crazy meeting with Hansen." So individually, none of this is damning, but when you put it together, OTO on the CV, a $3 million lab proposal, a Robo Epstein, Kabbalah Labyrinth, genetically engineered art, and the guy he's building all of this for is running baby farms and buying Crowley's sex magic books, that's when the pattern starts to look different. January 7th, 2015. Yosha Bach, an AI researcher at MIT Media Lab in Harvard, emails Epstein from Berlin. He mentions two people, Michael Vassar and Michelle Riley. They're in Puerto Rico, and they want to visit the island. Epstein responds immediately. Have them come tomorrow at 12, leave at 5. His assistant books the flights. January 9, Epstein emails Bach about the visit. I like the idea. He and Michelle were here yesterday. Again, you were right. He was fun. And blue-eyed. Yeah. 2 days later, January 11th, 2015, Michelle Riley, quantum computing scientist, Princeton Math, Columbia Physics, co-funded a startup with MIT professor Seth Lloyd, sends this email to Epstein. Thanks, Jeff. You asked for fun projects. I think we're mostly starving for great conspiracies today. 10 to 12 person coordinated secrets. What about a new Rosicrucianism of sorts? A new Rosicrucianism? She's proposing they build one. What are your thoughts on funding and constructing your own intelligence agency? She even talks about the science salons. I'd also like to do an exclusive science salon sort of thing at a place like Esalen, or maybe on Little St. James. Experimentation with philosophers and scientists examining physiological stuff. Physiological stuff? Experimentation? On the island? High-profile island orgies also independently come to mind, but I have a strong suspicion that you may already have that covered. Fraternal regards from one Coney Island baby to another. Hold up. Fraternal regards? That's fraternal order language. But did you catch that? One Coney Island baby to another. In the early 1900s, Coney Island was famous for putting premature babies on display in incubators as a sideshow attraction. From one incubator baby to another. And she's writing this to the man running baby farms. Epstein received this at 10:34 p.m. At 11:02 p.m., 28 minutes later, he forwarded it to Yosha Bach. Bach replied at 12:26 a.m. A shadow research planning academy where scientific visionaries project future research agendas in new disciplines. A series of workshops focusing on neglected knowledge such as Russian psychopharmacology, Buddhist psychology, Chinese opinion control, a network of media people that can be used to efficiently place and coordinate friendly items in our corrupt opinion market. Psychedelic retreats for groups of select individuals with the explicit goal to create a tightly knit group capable of radically thinking and influencing global affairs. There are some more that I would not want to put into email. How much more do they need to spell it out for you? A shadow academy, media manipulation, psychedelic retreats for global influence, and things that he wouldn't put in writing. Bach wasn't an outsider. Epstein funded him directly. He stayed in Epstein's Manhattan apartment. Epstein's office booked his flights. He's all over the archive. December 8th, 2014. John Brockman, founder of the Edge Foundation, the man who organized the Billionaires' Dinners, sets up an art event in Palo Alto. Larry Page, co-founder of Google. Elon Musk. Anne Wojcicki, co-founder of 23andMe, the DNA company. Jeffrey Epstein. In the entertainment, Marina Abramovich, masterclass on art, segueing into something spontaneously orchestrated, an Abramovich piece. Marina Abramovich, the performance artist, performing for a room containing the co-founder of Google, Elon Musk, the CEO of a DNA company, and Jeffrey Epstein. You, however, are far more mysterious and intriguing. That's how Brockman described Epstein to the other guest. Mysterious and intriguing. Also on the guest list, Mucha Prada, and in a footnote about the architect Rem Koolhaas, Brockman noted he couldn't attend. Unfortunately, is in Moscow, December 7th, meeting with Putin. And about those billionaire dinners, EFTA 0251169, quote, "It is Bill Gates who at the end of the summer began prodding Epstein to begin a process of public rehabilitation. That means Gates wasn't duped. He initiated the comeback." And after one of Brockman's dinners, the ones with Bezos, both Google founders, Musk, Epstein emails Brockman, EFTA 01929775. "Your Goyim dinner was amazing. Thank you very much for including me. Where are the Jews?" That's how he talked about a room full of the most powerful people in technology. Les Wexner, founder of L Brands, Victoria's Secret, Bath & Body Works, The Limited, the man who gave Jeffrey Epstein power of attorney over his entire financial empire, gave him a $13.2 million Manhattan mansion and gave him access to Victoria's Secret. In 1985, New York Magazine published a profile of Les Wexner. And in that profile, Wexner described living with a debug since he was a boy. His father recognized it, calling it the churning. A debug, in Jewish mysticism, is a possessing spirit. The article describes it as the demon that always wakes up in the morning with Wexner and tweaks and pulls at him. Okay, so follow me. Les Wexner, the billionaire who handed his entire empire to Jeffrey Epstein, told a major magazine he lived with a demon, and nobody followed up on that. In 2019, the FBI listed Wexner as one of the 10 co-conspirators in Epstein's trafficking operation. That document sat sealed until January 2026. Power of attorney, $13 million mansion, Victoria's Secret, FBI co-conspirator, and he told you that he lived with a demon. Now again, I don't think it's a crime to have books on magic or even sex magic, but with this context, we need to cover it because Bloomberg News verified some of Epstein's book purchases. Modern Sex Magic: Secrets of Erotic Spirituality. Apparently, the book contains what the publisher describes as the rarest of Crowley's sex magic instructions and the sexual secrets of Kabbalah dating back to the Temple of Solomon. Secrets of Western Tantra by Christopher S. Hyatt. Hyatt co-founded the Thelemic Order of the Golden Dawn. In the preface, the Aeon of the Child, Crowley's New Age, ruled by a child god. Basically, the reason why I bring this up is because most likely, Epstein knew about the creation of a moon child. Interestingly, he also had chakra and kundalini workbooks, Merchants in the Temple by Gianluigi Nuzzi, an expose of Vatican financial corruption in child abuse scandals. But let me show you something that goes way beyond the bookshelf. So Epstein didn't just read about Kabbalah, he was being taught it, apparently, by a man named Mark Fisher, EFTA 02428-208. March 10, 2010. Mark Fisher, an art dealer and Orthodox Jewish spiritual advisor, writes to Epstein. Fisher is undergoing chemotherapy, and between cancer treatments, he's teaching Jeffrey Epstein Kabbalistic doctrine. Quote, "A Jewish soul has a very different structure, different ingredients, relates to its higher levels differently, has different higher levels, relates to itself and other people in a different manner than a non-Jewish soul. To use repair methods on something as sensitive as a soul requires the right tools. You can't fix an Aston Martin with a Ford pickup truck tool set." So he's making an analogy that Jewish souls are the luxury car and non-Jewish meditation is the wrong toolkit. And this isn't Fisher's personal opinion. This is standard Tanya doctrine, the foundational text of the Chabad Lubavitch. And Fisher was teaching it directly to Jeffrey Epstein. Over the next few months, Fisher sends Epstein the Shema Yisrael, the most sacred prayer in Judaism, and asks for his Hebrew name and his mother's Hebrew name. In Kabbalah, you pray using someone's name through their mother's lineage. He offers weekly phone sessions on gematria, Torah law, and meditation. And he connects Epstein's philanthropy directly to the Wexner Heritage Foundation. The same Wexner. But this is kind of weird. Fisher died of cancer in December 2011. Epstein told an associate, quote, "Say a prayer on my behalf." But the point is, it does seem that this Jewish soul concept wasn't just a Fisher thing. This permeated the network. EFTA 018-20876. David Gelernter, the Yale computer scientist, famous as the Unabomber target, is writing to Epstein about Hebrew calligraphy. And he just casually quotes the Zohar, one of the central texts of Kabbalah. As the Zohar says, man, genuine man, exists only at the moment of sexual union. Epstein responds, "I think you might consider focusing on the negative spaces between the Hebrew letters, much more erotic, a bulging Shema, or throbbing Ka." Gelernter is quoting Kabbalah and Epstein is sexualizing it. That's how the inner circle talked. EFTA 0256152. 7 years after Fisher's emails, 2017, Kathy Rumler, Barack Obama's White House counsel, writes to Epstein. "And here I thought only I had a Jewish soul." And again in 2019, EFTA 02630427, Rumler to Epstein, "You forgot that I have a Jewish soul?" EFTA 01615476, December 2018, Epstein and Steve Bannon texting. Bannon asks about breast cancer research. Epstein just says, "Jews?" And then it almost seems like he's saying he's following their directions. Bannon says, "Love being a junior partner to chosen people of Yahweh." Then Bannon says, "Smart. Let's get rolling." Epstein corrects his spelling, Yahweh, like Mish Agas. Gotta get the spelling right. And then he says, not sure Beelzebub is considered a junior partner? More like outside counsel. What? And then there's this. EFTA 018-21140, October 2009. Epstein to an associate. This is the way Jews make money, selling short the shipping futures. Let the Goyim deal in the real world. Then there's this. Epstein emailed the text of Ezekiel chapter 9 verse 6. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women. So, Crowley's sex magic, the Aeon of the Child, Kabbalistic soul doctrine, a Bible verse about slaying children. This is what was on the bookshelf and in the inbox. But it wasn't just books. EFTA 02443141. Maxwell emails Epstein. To take an oath, ancient Romans put a hand on their testicles. That's where the word testimony comes from. Epstein corrects her. You have it backwards. You were required to put a hand on the other person's. The etymology is real. Testimony does come from the Latin testes. But the point isn't the joke. The point is she's sending him esoteric trivia, and he already knows more than she does. That means he was studying this. Okay, now let me show you what they built on the island. This is EFTA 027074666. Architectural calculations for Little St. James. The architect, Eon Nicola. 1.618. Phi, the golden ratio. Every Masonic temple, every cathedral, and Epstein's dome. Nicola calculated the golden ratio for the rocks, for the doors, for the dome. The blue and gold striped dome on Little St. James, which by the way the internet has been calling a temple since drone footage first surfaced, was proportioned using sacred geometry. Both properties, Little St. James and Zorro Ranch, Epstein had sundials constructed. Masonic tradition. Epstein personally directed their construction. Then there's a structure on Little St. James that was permitted as a music pavilion. But what was built deviated significantly from the plans. Blue and white striped walls, gold dome, acoustic panels, soundproofed walls, a door engineered to prevent people from leaving. Inside, a bookcase flanked by two pillars. Jachin and Boaz, the pillars of Solomon's temple, and every Masonic lodge in the world. Also, take a look at the ceiling. A music pavilion with soundproofed walls, a door that locks from the outside, and the pillars of Solomon's temple. Zorro Ranch, the New Mexico property, stone circles. May 2017, an email from a Saudi-connected intermediary to Jeffrey Epstein about a political meeting on the Yemen conflict. The man who presented to you with the holy black Kaaba dress holds all the strings in his hands, certainly with Washington. The holy black Kaaba dress, the kiswa, the cloth that covers the Kaaba, replaced once a year, given to heads of state, one of the holiest objects in Islam. A man with connections to Washington presented it to Epstein during a political meeting about a war. In a separate exchange, Epstein asked his staff, "Did you take the Islamic cloth to be backed, mounted, preserved, like an artifact?" This is a photo from 2014. Jeffrey Epstein and Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, chairman of DP World, one of the largest port operators on Earth, inspecting a fragment of the kiswa, Islam's holiest cloth, in the hands of a convicted sex offender. 2003. This photograph was found during the 2005 raid of Epstein's Palm Beach mansion and later authenticated in the Maxwell trial. Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell in an audience with Pope John Paul II. In FBI documents, an Italian cybersecurity figure, described by an FBI source as Epstein's personal hacker, appears in the case files. The same source says this individual may have held a Vatican passport. The Pope photo was displayed in Epstein's Manhattan mansion, and on his bookshelf, Merchants in the Temple, an expose of Vatican financial corruption and child abuse. The Kaaba cloth in his hands, the Pope on his wall, and the pillars of Solomon's temple on his island. Now look at this. An email. A young woman to Jeffrey Epstein. I can't do Tantra because I even don't know you well. Another email. When my mom back to Moscow, I want a lot of Tantra sessions. I definitely want to learn about Tantra. We did exercises, and I had... She would be in shock. If she saw you during the Tantra, I didn't tell her anything. Next, a numbered list. 1. Kundalini. 2. Prostate massage. 3. Tantra. Obviously, it would seem he had an advanced knowledge of spiritual practice merged with sexual acts, and it was numbered like a schedule. Had Kundalini class, wow. A Kundalini teacher wrote to Epstein, "You want to live forever? I can show you how." Look at this email. Epstein instructs his financial manager, send $10,000 to Sacred Space. The service? 50 digital detox massage ritual gift certificates? 20 for the various girls, 20 for patients. $10,000 massage rituals for various girls from a company called Sacred Space. Epstein was also deeply involved with Barbara Carella's Urban Tantra Sacred Sex program in Charles Muir's Source Tantra School. This is kind of weird. Epstein visited the Dhammakaya Temple in Thailand, a 4-day trip. Day 4, Dhammakaya Temple. Dhammakaya is kind of strange. It's one of the most controversial Buddhist organizations in the world, cult-like practices, a massive golden dome, UFO shaped, and it seats over 1 million people. The Thai government has raided it multiple times. Daniel Siad sent Epstein a link to the Dhammakaya website. In Marrakesh, Epstein had a property with underground disco, underground city, underground tunnels. Look at this email. Everything must be kept underground. I just need to find access. It literally may be unfathomable what is going on underground. September 2010, Al Seckel, a cognitive neuroscientist who organized Epstein's island conferences, and Pablos Holman approach Epstein with a proposal. Would you be interested in having all that crap that comes up on a Google search on your name basically disappear? Epstein, yes. Is your yes to our hacking of the internet sites to cause all that crap to disappear? Send the wire details. Listen. The other stuff mysteriously disappears from searches will drive some jerks crazy because they will have no idea how this was possible. Isn't technology fun when you have the right friends? $20,000 to hack search results for a convicted sex offender, and the man offering to do it, Al Seckel, also curated Epstein's guest list, the same guest list that included Larry Page, the co-founder of Google. 4 years later, Seckel fell off a cliff in southern France. But before Seckel died, there's something else in that same email chain. October 2009, Seckel and Epstein are discussing cold fusion. Epstein writes, regarding cold fusion, I killed Pons years ago. Seckel asks, how did you kill him? Stanley Pons, the chemist who claimed to discover cold fusion in 1989. His career was destroyed. He fled to France and never published again. Epstein claims he argued against cold fusion funding in Congress. Says he met with the head of the Mormon church about it. Whether that's true or exaggerated, this is how Epstein saw himself. He wasn't just funding science, he was deciding which science lived and which died, and he was bragging about it. Now here's how the network maintained its power. Look at this. Epstein emailing himself? Subject line, Wexner. 4 emails in 1 minute, each one adding another line. Wexner, necklace, Mother suicide Sharon. Taxes. New Albany. Bankrupt. Never ever. Each email adds another piece of leverage. Necklace. Mother's suicide? Is he implying that's a fake suicide? Taxes. Bankruptcy. A pressure file? The same Wexner who said he lived with a demon. The same Wexner who gave Epstein his mansion in his financial empire. Ghislaine Maxwell had a playbook for it. If you call, I'd start by saying whatever you saw was fake and part of a blackmail scheme. When blackmail came from the outside, Epstein handled it. There's a Russian girl attempting to blackmail a group of powerful businessmen. Epstein, give me a few days to get information about her. He was a fixer. EFTA 024350005. Epstein to Boris Nikolic. I guess you were one of the altar boys that was not abused, but now feels left out. That's how he casually talked about it. Y'all want to see something crazy? It wasn't just notes to himself. This was an operation. EFTA 024-63816. May 2016. Epstein emails himself a memo in real time, documenting a shakedown as it happens. Kadash and Jean-Luc blackmail. Today, at approximately 5:04 p.m., I called Michel Kadash. He told me that boys had gotten Jean-Luc total immunity for $3 million. Jean-Luc would not go in to speak. Whoa. To stop a witness from testifying? EFTA 025-73903. Someone emails Epstein directly. Jeffrey, how many compromising pics of me do you have? Epstein's response, all great. EFTA 023-71291. An associate writes, has all that vile publicity finally gone away for good? Or do they keep stirring the pot for more blackmail money every few months? And the person writing this just spent the weekend at David Koch's in Palm Beach? And then the destruction. EFTA 017-48314. A memo from his operations team. The document retention policy that we have been operating under is as follows. 1999 through 2006, we shred. 2007 through 2014, we scan and shred. Companies to shred. Little St. James, FTC, JEVIF, Zorro Ranch, JEGE, FT Real Estate, Hyperion, NES, every single entity. We're literally just seeing the tip of the iceberg. EFTA 02474072, January 2016. Epstein writing to Ariane de Rothschild. I recognize that in the past, only you had all the pieces and compartmentalized. With good reason. Copies of the girls' passports, yours, medical emergency numbers, current wills. No one in Europe should see all. In the same thread, someone says, Oliver liked the idea of a special Kazakhstan program as the story to tell others. So cover stories for this operation. FBI document, sitting in the Epstein files, top of the page, secret/no foreign. No foreign nationals, classified intelligence. What is this doing in a sex trafficking case? But there's another secret no foreign document I found. EFTA 01683612 and FBI FD 1023. That's a confidential human source report, filed December 2021 out of the Los Angeles field office. Under the active Epstein child sex trafficking investigation, the source says, Epstein was a construct who was playing a role. Specifically, Epstein was running an Israeli state-sponsored technology collection and extortion operation. Whoa. Epstein's operation lured some of the most powerful and influential people in the world to his home, where they had the opportunity to have you-know-what with you-know-who in lavish situations. This would have been recorded in some way, which could be used to control and extort non-cooperators as needed in the future. And about his death? Due to the number of secrets, Epstein must have been aware of it. It's not surprising he did not last long after being put into custody. The source also names Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine's father, as a very wealthy Israeli intelligence Mossad agent. This is a classified FBI intelligence document. So wait, the FBI knew the entire operation was an Israeli state-sponsored sexual blackmail and technology collection scheme? Did boys ask you to help obtain former Mossad agents to do dirty investigations? This is getting a lot of press. EFTA 02507-843, March 2018. Epstein forwards an article about Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine's father, to his circle. The article says, Robert Maxwell threatened Mossad. He told them that unless they gave him $400 million to save his crumbling empire, he would expose all he had done for them. Maxwell passed on all the secrets he learned to Mossad in Tel Aviv. In turn, they tolerated his excesses, vanities, and insatiable appetite for a luxurious lifestyle and women. And Epstein forwarded this. January 2018. Epstein writes to Steve Bannon, the man who ran Trump's presidential campaign. I suggest my house, 9 East 71st Street. Similar to SCIF, you choose the time. A SCIF? A classified intelligence facility? Soundproof, no electronics. Epstein compared his Manhattan townhouse to a classified intelligence facility. And in those same iMessage threads, Bannon asked Epstein about his scientific verticals. What has he put time, thought, and money behind? Epstein's answer? Difference between the unexplainable and the occult. Bannon says, I love that. You familiar with Newton and alchemy? Epstein says, very. The Philosopher's Stone. Bannon says, remember, we're showing something that will mesmerize folks. So they're filming something. A documentary. Bannon later asked, do you want to film the island? The ranch? And Epstein defines one of his core intellectual pursuits as the difference between the unexplainable and the occult. Guys, Epstein knows alchemy. And at private dinners with Bezos, both Google founders, and Paul Allen, dinners Epstein was at the table for. The instructions were, please cooperate by maintaining radio silence. Show up alone. And I thought this was kind of crazy. So, in EFTA 016-57089, this is March 2025. An FBI agent emails the former Epstein case team. I was under the impression that there was a homemade sex video of Epstein and Maxwell amongst our seized evidence. Can anyone confirm or deny this? One person responds that I don't recall. The agent writes back, thanks, you happen to be the only one to reply. And the response is, maybe people were afraid to put anything into writing. In 2025. FBI agents are still afraid to discuss Epstein evidence in writing? EFTA 027-29919, October 2021. The MCC, the Metropolitan Correctional Center, where Epstein died, is being closed. A Bureau of Prisons investigator emails the FBI. I was instructed to destroy all evidence that is not needed for investigations. A blanket destruction order? At the facility where Epstein died. The FBI's response? Is it possible to get a list of what you have first? They didn't even know what evidence existed. In 2019, journalist Vicky Ward reported that when the US attorney was asked why Epstein got the most lenient plea deal in federal history, a source said, I was told to back off, that Epstein was above my pay grade. I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence. Belong to intelligence? Remember the Rosicrucian email? What are your thoughts on funding and constructing your own intelligence agency? He was already running one. And here's what the FBI found when they finally went inside. A painting of Bill Clinton in a blue dress hanging on the wall. A framed photograph of Epstein with Pope John Paul II. A framed photograph of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, roleplay costumes, including school uniforms, and there's a bunch more disturbing related artworks. There are a few emails that are a little mysterious. For example, this one. You had your eyes clenched shut last time. Not fair. Eyes clenched shut? Eyes wide shut? Stanley Kubrick's film about elite secret society rituals? Another weird one. An unknown sender, sending a full wiki page for the Wicker Man? EFTA 027-22330. So, this movie's about ritual human sacrifice on a remote island, recommending a film about sacrifice on an island to a man who owned an island. One more thing before I pull the thread. I showed you a victim who wrote her diary in cipher, rail fence cipher, and the DOJ decoded it. But there's another one, and she describes even more names, even more powerful men, and she describes a financier who bit her and threw her on the floor. She describes a former Treasury official, a football team owner, a US senator that she says looked like a grandfather but wasn't, and she names them. She's actually literally writing about the system. Yeah, you're gonna have to look into that one on your own. Let me pull the thread. 1868, the Zodiac Club is founded. 12 seats, Rothschild, JP Morgan, the architects of the Federal Reserve. 1985, Les Wexner tells New York Magazine he's lived with a demon since boyhood. 2003, Epstein and Maxwell have a private audience with the Pope. 2007, Epstein purchases Aleister Crowley's sex magic books, The Aeon of the Child. 2010, he asks for help continuing an old school secret society, gets invited to the Zodiac Club. His advisor offers to hack Google. He pays in wire transfer. 2011, he designs a 4-level harem modeled on the Ottoman Palace, the same email thread as a dinner with every tech billionaire alive. 2013, the creator of the world's most famous humanoid robot, an active member of Aleister Crowley's OTO, pitches Epstein a $3 million lab for mind uploading, and a robo-Epstein. 2014, Marina Abramovich performs for Larry Page, Elon Musk, and Epstein. 2015, a quantum computing scientist proposes new Rosicrucianism, a private intelligence agency, and experiments on the island. Epstein forwards it in 28 minutes. The reply? A shadow academy, media manipulation, psychedelic retreats for global influence, and things he wouldn't put in an email. 2017, a man with connections to Washington presents Epstein with Islam's holiest cloth, the kiswa, during a political meeting about Yemen. His island dome was proportioned using the golden ratio. His temple had the Pillars of Solomon. His doorways were built so people couldn't leave. His files had a classified intelligence document. And when the US attorney asked why he got the lightest deal in federal history, the answer was, he belonged to intelligence. Everything I just told you has a document number. It would seem that the elites are experimenting with tech that they don't want us to know about because, well, they have certain plans for us. It all revolves around immortality. I've now spent 2 weeks in 846,000 files, and what came out of it is a pipeline. 5 stages. Map the mind, model the brain, preserve it, build a new body, then transfer.
Do you see a path for Optimus to have consciousness downloaded to it?
You mean human consciousness, or?
Yes.
It's not like immediate, but if you say it down the road, would you be able to, say, with a neural link, have a snapshot of, or at least an approximate snapshot of somebody's mind, and then upload that approximate snapshot to an Optimus body? I think that at some point that technology becomes possible, and it's probably less than 20 years. But of course, you won't quite be the same. It'll be a little different because you'll be in a robot body, and the mental snapshot will not be precise. It'll be probably pretty close, but not exactly the same. On the other hand, are you the same person that you were 5 years ago? Nope. I mean, a lot of things have changed. But I guess at some point, if you want to be uploaded to a robot body, my guess is that becomes possible.
That's Elon Musk talking about uploading a mind into a robot body. 20 years, he says. But the thing is, someone was already funding this research. Every single stage of it. The consciousness mapping, the brain scans, the preservation tech, the bodies, and the scientists doing this were all on Jeffrey Epstein's payroll. The researchers had a name for it: cosmic consciousness. He literally had a brain scanner set up in the same Manhattan townhouse where Epstein was trafficking women. And one of the proposals included a line item for, and I'm quoting, sexy android bodies. Look at this email. This was sent by Jeffrey Epstein to Barnaby Marsh. It's a proposal, a research agenda, and it contains 2 items that have never been reported together. Item 1, build a mind reader using de-encryption, new understandings of the brain. Item 2, tissue regeneration, in parentheses, cloning. Hold up, because this is important. A device that can read a human mind, but that device is connected to a process that can clone a human body, all in one document? We already discussed Gino Yu, Hong Kong Polytechnic University. He built a 5-stage model for rating how conscious a person is. Stage 1 through stage 5. Kinda like a video game, he mapped out the human soul on a spreadsheet. EFTA 0258131, Gino Yu writes to Epstein, "When you offered me the 100K last year, my only request has been to support the Cuba conference when they asked for 25K. $100,000, that was Gino Yu's retainer, and his job wasn't just research, it was recruitment." Gino Yu brought Peter Fenwick to Epstein. He brought Dean Radin. And he brought Stuart Hameroff. He connected Epstein to Chinese parapsychology researchers. He found the people studying things that aren't supposed to exist. And then he set up shop. November 2016, Gino Yu writes to Epstein, "I picked up a Vive setup that I hope to install at your place. I will also have a custom EEG rig set up as well." A custom EEG rig? That's the device that reads your brainwaves. And he installed it alongside a virtual reality headset, an HTC Vive, in the small room off the library of Epstein's Manhattan townhouse. So follow me. Now Jeffrey Epstein has a room in his house where you put on a VR headset and he monitors your brainwaves. Keep in mind, this is the same house where he was supposedly trafficking women. And apparently he was scoring people. EFTA 026244641, Gino Yu writes to Epstein about a specific woman. "In my model, she is a stage 3.5 or so." Then he lays out the full scale. Stage 1, consensus reality. Stage 2, all in one thing. Stage 3, surrendering to the bigger forces at work. Stage 4, intuition and insight. Stage 5, special abilities in a rounded way. Special abilities? That's where the scale ends? Gino Yu was rating real people on it, measuring how close they were to developing abilities that aren't supposed to exist. EFTA 025677715. And then he proposed a program to Epstein called Polystry for rehabilitating 80 stage 3 people who have gifts but cannot support themselves. 80 people in vulnerable, altered psychological states who they claim to have gifts. So is this a recruitment pipeline for the psychologically fragile? And the consciousness research wasn't informal. It had a team, a budget, and a name. EFTA 0246026. Peter Fenwick emails Epstein, and the subject? Cosmic consciousness. That's what they called it. Then Fenwick lays out the team to Epstein. Light study. Professor Fabio Babiloni for EEG and fMRI brain scanning, Dr. Ioannidis for data analysis in Cyprus, Professor Kevin Moore on autonomic nervous system measurements, and Professor Giuseppe Bersani funding the whole thing from his trust. All to be done at Rome Sapienza University. Then Fenwick writes again. Completed grant application. $441,100. Very good study with controls. Being done in an excellent unit. High quality. So it would seem this isn't a hobby. It looks like a funded scientific program with an international team studying what happens to the brain at the boundary of life and death. And Fenwick's specialty is near-death experiences. What happens to consciousness when the body dies? That's what Epstein was paying him to answer. Fenwick was just the beginning. Let me show you who else was on this roster. EFTA 02353378. Dr. Jeffrey Martin, a researcher at Stanford who scientifically maps enlightenment states. He calls it persistent non-symbolic experience, PNSE, a clinical term for what monks spend decades trying to achieve. Martin personally invited Epstein to his transformative technology conference. EFTA 016-12793. Dean Radin, Director of Research at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, Parapsychology, Telepathy, Precognition. Epstein's Skype logs show an incoming call from Dean Radin, 48 minutes and 32 seconds, April 2nd, 2018. A 48-minute phone call with a parapsychologist. Same day, and I mean the same day, as the holy shit spoon email about spoon bending experiments. EFTA 01771437. A program claiming a 73% success rate at engineering enlightenment states. Whoa, so we're not talking about meditation retreats or spiritual workshops. 73% transition rate. They were manufacturing consciousness states like a production line. But you ready to get even crazier? EFTA 02579443. After years of funding this research, years of paying Gino Yu, flying Fenwick around the world, hosting Radin, scanning brains, Epstein writes this: I've seen no one with special abilities. Not one. Wait, what? Nobody had psychic powers? Nobody could bend spoons? Nobody could read minds? So he was testing this. But wait, he kept paying. So why would you keep funding a program that produces zero results? Because Gino Yu told him it was working on someone specific. In the same email chain, after Epstein says, not one, Gino Yu responds, one of the ideas we have for research and application is to get people with special abilities that can also train and mentor from all around the world to support those that are coming into their own, like Masha. Masha Jerkova, the subject of Putin's Kiss, the documentary about Russia's youth propaganda movement. She's mentioned a lot in the archive, and it would seem that she was a test subject. Gino Yu said she was coming into her own, developing abilities, and the plan was to surround her with mentors who already had them. Nobody had proven abilities, but the program to develop them was still running. EFTA 02657514, February 2017. Gino Yu emails Epstein about Jeff Bezos. Authors gather at Jeff Bezos' super secret campfire event. I hear he gets people with special abilities at these events. Whoa, what? So Bezos had his own program? It's the same language, special abilities. And it's the same format, invite-only events with these hand-picked people. And Gino Yu is reporting this to Epstein like he's a scout, almost like he's his intelligence. Okay, but now let's talk about Chopra. Chopra sent Epstein everything. aura measurement apps, biofield science papers, virtual reality meditation experiences. EFTA 01784162, August 2016. Chopra sends Epstein a Guardian article about meditation in virtual reality. Quote, "It's like French philosophy meets the Matrix." So it would seem that Chopra was feeding Epstein the technology side of consciousness. And in return, Epstein gave Chopra access, dinners, island visits, conferences. And then there's this. Epstein asked Deepak Chopra, a consciousness researcher, whether anesthetics can affect consciousness and the mechanism. Chopra responds with the pharmacology, then asks, "Why do you ask?" Why was Jeffrey Epstein asking a consciousness researcher about lethal anesthesia? I don't have the answer, but I have this document. Chopra and Epstein were building a research pipeline. EFTA 023-93017. Chopra forwards Epstein a thread about savant syndrome and non-local mind from Daryl Trefford, the world's top savant researcher. 300 documented cases, and in this chain, Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell, a researcher who studies telepathy in autistic children, and Paul Mills from UCSD, who attended a Salk Institute conference on extraordinary variations of the human mind. Epstein's response, "I'll fund the assistant, no help needed." So he funded a telepathy study on children with autism through Chopra's network. Yosha Bach, the AI researcher. He's almost in the file more than anyone else. If Gino Yu was the recruiter, Bach was the theorist. He's the man Epstein turned to when he wanted to understand what consciousness actually is, in mathematical terms. Bach developed a concept he called mobjects, mathematical objects that describe consciousness as computation. He proposed that the brain is a machine, and consciousness is the software running on it. So, the implication is, if consciousness is software, it can be copied. Over $1 million confirmed, $300,000 for a visa arrangement, $382,000 through the enhanced entity in 2016, $125,000 in 2018. Flights, housing, MIT salary supplements. Again, this wasn't a hobby. Epstein was Bach's primary patron. And let's not forget the whole secret society email with Bach's group. But now you have the context. Psychedelic retreats for select individuals? You may have thought it was the billionaires who wanted to take the psychedelics. But no, we're talking about physiological experiments, a private intelligence agency, a cryptographically secure social network, and then, direct quote from Michelle Riley, high-profile island you-know-what also independently come to mind, but I have a strong suspicion that you may already have that covered. Do you get it now? They knew. The inner circle was joking about it. Okay, but a theory isn't enough. You need a map of the actual hardware. EFTA 02375911. A meeting. Ed Boyden, MIT neuroscientist, inventor of expansion microscopy, the man building an atlas of brain computations. Next to him, Whitfield Diffie, the godfather of public key cryptography, and Martin Novak, evolutionary mathematician. Okay, so a brain mapper, a code breaker, and an evolution theorist in the same room at Epstein's request. Why would you need a cryptographer at a brain mapping meeting unless you're trying to decode something? Boyden, quote, "A single neuron can flip the state of the whole brain," end quote. So one cell, one switch, and consciousness shifts entirely. EFTA 02357394. Boyden again. This time with Sebastian Sung and Neil Gershenfeld. So they're invited to Epstein's island, and the subject of the meeting? Deception. The world's top brain mappers on a private island discussing deception. Sebastian Sung wrote a book called Connect to Me. The thesis? You are your connect to me. Your identity, your memories, your personality, your consciousness is encoded in the wiring pattern of your neurons. Map every connection, and you've mapped the person. EFTA 01880316. And here's where it gets a little uncomfortable. The person who recommended Connect to Me to Epstein? Jean-Luc Brunel. The trafficking associate? The man later found dead in his Paris jail cell? He's the one who told Epstein to read the book about mapping human consciousness through neural wiring. A trafficker recommending a neuroscience book to a PDF. I'll let you sit with that. And this wasn't happening in a vacuum. Silicon Valley was in the room. EFTA 01789503. Reid Hoffman, LinkedIn founder, emails Epstein and Mark Zuckerberg together. Quote, Jeffrey, Zuck, email connections from the Ed Boyden dinner so that the combo can continue. Wait, so let me get this straight. Reid Hoffman introduced Mark Zuckerberg to Jeffrey Epstein. And the reason? A dinner about neuroscience hosted by Ed Boyden, the brain mapper. This wasn't just a billionaire party. This was a working meeting about the brain. And Hoffman wanted Zuckerberg and Epstein to keep talking about it. Take note about that for later. Same, Reid Hoffman. Same year. EFTA 01788970. The subject line, Skype about deception. So what's up with this deception stuff? Recipients, Hoffman, Joy Ito, Kevin Slavin, and Epstein. Hoffman responds, generally around this week and next, interested. Reid Hoffman, Joy Ito from MIT Media Lab, and Jeffrey Epstein organizing a group call to discuss deception. That's a pattern. And then someone in Epstein's circle text, very intrigued by Neuralink. Did like Chopra at the beginning, but have grown disappointed with him. AI fascinates me. So, Neuralink, Chopra, and AI, all in one message. The brain-computer interface, the consciousness researcher, and the machine intelligence. It all connects to Epstein. Stage 3 of the pipeline. Once you understand consciousness and you've modeled the brain, you need to preserve it, because eventually the body dies. Listen closely. There's a company called Nectome. Their technology is chemical brain preservation. They pump a solution through your brain that fixes every neural connection in place, permanently. The idea is that someday, someone could scan that preserved brain and extract the connect to me, the wiring diagram of who you were. And Jeffrey Epstein was tracking them. EFTA 02506384, March 2018. Epstein reaches out to Yosha Bach about brain preservation options. He wants to know what's the state of the art, what works, and what doesn't. EFTA 02470197. Bach meets Nectome's CEO, Robert McIntyre, and in person, and reports this back to Epstein. He sent Bach as a scout. Meet the CEO, evaluate the technology, report back. EFTA 02508072, and in the discussion about Nectome, someone writes, Sam Altman has signed up as far as I know. As always, chances that the current plan for restoring memory from Connect to Me works one day are quite close to nothing but absolute zero. Structure might be better preserved than in traditional cryo, but tissue gone. So, Sam Altman, the man who would go on to run OpenAI, signed up for brain preservation through Nectome? And this is being discussed in Epstein's documents alongside connect-to-me analysis and cryonics comparisons. But Nectome wasn't the only option. There was also Alcor, EFTA 0245439. Marvin Minsky, the father of artificial intelligence, MIT legend, had a cryonics contract with Alcor. His brain was to be preserved after death. And the man running Alcor? Max Moore. Here's a quote from the archive. Max Moore, CEO of Alcor, the leading cryonics firm, and before that, arguably the founding philosopher of transhumanism. Now, this detail has been reported before, but I want you to hear it in this context. The New York Times citing a source in the archive. Mr. Epstein told this person that he wanted his head and private parts to be frozen. His head, where the brain is, and his reproductive organs. The two things you need to preserve if your goal was to rebuild yourself. And in his personal notes, Epstein saves a reference to Frank Tipler's The Physics of Immortality, a book that argues physics allows for digital resurrection, that the laws of the universe permit bringing consciousness back from the dead. This obviously wasn't just casual reading. Alright, so map the mind, model the brain, preserve it after death. That's 3 stages. But a preserved brain in a jar doesn't do anything. You need somewhere to put it. Now let me show you what the body was for. EFTA 02546529, November 18th, 2011. George Church is corresponding about a cloning-related event. He's cautious. He knows the risk. And Epstein was getting cloning updates from Richard Merkin, CEO of Heritage Provider Network. And these were regular updates on cloning progress. This looked like eugenics, like he wanted to breed a certain kind of human. Now, it looks like step 4 of the pipeline. Build a compatible vessel. About David Hansen, the creator of Sophia, the world's most famous humanoid robot. Sophia. That Hansen is a member of the OTO, Aleister Crowley's occult order. A man building human-looking robots while belonging to a sex magic society. EFTA 02229729, Hansen Robotics. Direct Skype calls with Jeffrey Epstein. Multiple conversations. About what? Building humanoid bodies. But it doesn't stop there. EFTA 02725875. The proposal, we talked about this, Genie Lab. $3 million. And the pitch includes, and I need you to hear this, sexy android bodies. Sexy android bodies with mind uploading in a $3 million proposal connected to Epstein's network. A lab that would build attractive humanoid bodies and upload minds into them. And the scientists that would make it work were already in the network. Randall Conant. In the archive, he says, the leading serious scientific exponent of mind uploading. He runs Carbon Copies, the foundation for substrate-independent minds. The idea that a mind doesn't need a biological brain, it can run on anything. In the same document, Luke Nosek, PayPal Mafia, Peter Thiel's co-founder at Founders Fund, and Dmitry Itskov's 2045 initiative, premised on launching the singularity from Russia by 2045. These aren't just fringe characters, these are billionaires and venture capitalists funding the technological architecture for moving a mind from one body to another. But what's even crazier is, maybe you don't need a robot. Maybe you build a better biological body. EFTA 02003049. Epstein writes, evolution, luck, chance. Evolution's not growth. One needs mutation, change to function. Directed evolution. Directed evolution, not natural selection, not random chance, guided. Frances Arnold, Caltech, she won the Nobel Prize in 2018 for the directed evolution of enzymes. She offered to teach Epstein about breeding molecules in microbes. Epstein was interested, but not in microbes. EFTA 01785366. And then there's this line. Virtual womb for all those preemies we are breeding. Preemies we are breeding. Virtual wombs. He's telling you, this is the body side of the pipeline. Breed better humans, grow them in artificial wombs, direct the evolution, build the vessel. The genetics weren't a separate project. They were stage 4. This is where it all connects, and this is the part that nobody has reported. EFTA 02642274. How do savants know things they never learned? My explanation is genetic memory, the genetic transmission of knowledge. Genetic memory, the idea that knowledge, consciousness itself, can be passed through DNA, not taught or learned, inherited. If that's true, then consciousness isn't just software running on the brain. It's encoded in the genes. And if it's in the genes, you can breed for it, edit for it, select for it. In the same thread, same EFTA, Chopra pushes back with a detail that changes everything. He tells Epstein about an acquired savant with an entirely different skill post-injury. Acquired savants. People who suffer brain injuries, car accidents, strokes, trauma, and wake up with abilities they never had before. Perfect musical pitch, calendar calculation, photographic memory, skills that appear from nowhere after the brain is damaged. If trauma can unlock abilities that were always encoded in the brain, abilities you never learned, abilities that might come from genetic memory, then Epstein's experiments on women take on a different dimension. Was he testing whether psychological trauma could trigger altered states of consciousness? Whether breaking someone's normal awareness could unlock something underneath? I mean, he was measuring belief thresholds with 200 women. He was funding research on savant telepathy in children with neurological differences. And now Chopra is telling him that brain damage creates savants? What if the trauma wasn't a side effect of the research, but actually a variable? Deepak Chopra was pushing the same idea, but from the other direction. Chopra's book, Super Genes, argues that the evolution of species is the evolution of consciousness. That genes don't just build bodies, they build awareness. EFTA 02045681. Epstein and Chopra visiting the Alchemist Kitchen together, an apothecary in Manhattan. Plant medicine, consciousness expansion, alchemy, they were practicing this kind of stuff. And then there's this conference, EFTA 02397964, a session titled Gene Editing in Consciousness. Whoa, a conference on gene editing in consciousness connected to Epstein's network. That's the bridge, and the thesis is, edit the genes, edit the mind. But let's talk about this Dmitry Itskov. Russian tech billionaire, founder of the 2045 initiative, and his public mission is to achieve human immortality through mind uploading by the year 2045. EFTA 02078308, May 2015. Itskov and Gino Yu, Epstein's consciousness recruiter, are arranging to meet in New York. They already know each other, both in Epstein's orbit, the mind-uploading billionaire and the consciousness stage mapper connecting through Epstein. The same month, Epstein writes to Itskov, "I spent the weekend with Chomsky at my house. Great, strong views, but clever." Noam Chomsky, the most cited intellectual of the 20th century, and in the same thread, Itskov mentions meeting a Buddhist monk who works for MIT and is interested in AI. We discussed possible AI's self-awareness. Then, Epstein sends Etzkoff a link to Rupert Sheldrake's online telepathy test. So Jeffrey Epstein sends the mind-uploading billionaire a telepathy experiment? Sheldrake's morphic resonance, the idea that consciousness extends beyond the brain, that minds can connect at a distance. This is another bridge. Mind uploading meets telepathy meets AI self-awareness meets genetic memory in one email chain. To him, Newton was an alchemist and a physicist. Consciousness was a genetic trait and a mystical state. The soul was dark matter and something you could upload. Okay, but everything that I've shown you so far, the brain mappers, the AI theorists, the VR rigs, the cryonics evaluations, all of it sounds like cutting edge research, and you maybe could argue that it's noble. But now let me show you who the test subjects were. EFTA 024-02848. David Savage asked Epstein, "You did an experiment with 200 girls where you held their hands and rating them?" And Epstein responds, "I did this with 200 girls. Each one had to rate the accuracy of diagnosis on a scale of 1 to 10. The written diagnosis was exactly the same for each." What? 200 girls given the same fake reading, and he's measuring how many of them believed it. EFTA 024-53747. Then Epstein designs another round for Savage. 10 women, you will need to touch each one. And his takeaway from all of this? Believing is more fun. But he's not debunking anything. He was measuring who could be made to believe and how fast. 200 women, the same fake reading, and scoring their conviction. But why touch? Well, because a neuroscientist told him that it works. EFTA 021-92305. Peter Fenwick, the same man running the Cosmic Consciousness program, tells Epstein that touch activates their hormonal system and that dominance hierarchy matters. So the science wasn't separate from the exploitation. Okay, but the women knew. Listen to what they wrote. EFTA 027-21399. A woman writes to Epstein, "You described me as a failed experiment. I didn't know that I was a part of one. Am I an unsuspecting Galatea or a pawn in your dealings with Leon? Am I an unsuspecting Galatea? Galatea from Greek mythology. Pygmalion sculpts the perfect woman and brings her to life. So this woman is asking Epstein, am I one of your unsuspecting creations that you sculpted and brought to life?" EFTA 018-62162. Another email about a different woman. Quote, "For me, it's a great experiment. Taking a girl who hadn't been with a guy until she was 23 and then getting her to this point. She is sufficiently confused, and I think you can get some mileage out of this." What? She is sufficiently confused, you can get some mileage. A great experiment. Now with this context, he's using the same word for the woman that he used for the consciousness research. Experiment. We have to consider whether they were a part of the same program. These spiritual practices and ideas weren't separate from the exploitation. They were the same delivery mechanism. EFTA 017436615. A message about Kundalini yoga class. Meet me at class 9:30. So many hot girls promise. Abundant. At a Kundalini class. And then there are the meeting notes. EFTA 020-45779. Action items from Epstein's meeting. Design fun experiments, e.g. mice on DMT and environmental medicine meme. Mice on DMT? That was the brainstorming idea at Epstein's meeting? Design a fun experiment, psychedelics on animals, and create a meme around environmental medicine. So that's the brand for their research? EFTA 02271445, January 2019, 6 months before his arrest. Gino Yu writes to Epstein, "I will also have a shaman with me, as well as a psychonaut that grows his own mushrooms." A shaman and a mushroom grower traveling with the consciousness recruiter coordinated in the same email chain as Yushabat. EFTA 02676253, Sacred Space, New York, an invoice to Epstein. 50 digital urban detox solution massage rituals. Digital? At $200 each? Total $10,000. Pre-purchased in bulk through JP Morgan Chase. Massage rituals, digital urban detox. It's basically consciousness language wrapped around a $10,000 massage invoice. EFTA 02045162, August 2016. Bebe Avdio, an assistant working out of Darren Indike's law office, confirms to Epstein 4 girls in total, and they are all 17. 2016, post-conviction, after the plea deal, after the sex offender registration. 4 girls, all 17, confirmed from the lawyer's office. But the reason I bring this up is because the consciousness experiments, the brain mapping, the VR rigs, the meditation apps, the enlightenment programs, all of this was running at the same time as this. EFTA 0003781, a girl tried to swim off the island. The bodyguard confirmed it. She tried to swim. In his assessment, her attempt showed no greater level of distress than he'd seen in other girls throughout the years. So he's seen this before. Other girls trying to escape the island. And the bodyguard himself told investigators he was frightened by Epstein. Apparently all the workers signed $1 million NDAs, and they're petrified to talk. So 5 stages. Map the consciousness. Gino Yu, Fenwick, Radin, Martin, Chopra. Understand what it is. Then, model the brain. Yosha Bach, Ed Boyden, Sebastian Sung. Describe it mathematically. Then, preserve the brain. Nectone, Alcor, cryonics. Keep it after death. Next, you build a new body. George Church, David Hansen, Genie Lab, directed evolution, create a vessel. Then, the transfer, the mind reader device. Read the mind, clone the body, upload. And at every stage, at every single stage, the research ran in parallel with this exploitation. The brain scanner was in the same house as the trafficking. The consciousness researcher and the massage therapist used the same vocabulary. The experiment was a scientific term and a word for woman. So we have to question whether he separated the two. And look, you might think this is crazy, you might think this is all nonsense. But here's the thing. This technology is happening right now. Everyone knows Elon is building the brain chip. And it would seem that their excuse is obviously to help the disabled. But listen to what he told shareholders. He thinks uploading a mind into a robot body is less than 20 years away. You think they're gonna tell us the truth? And then there's an EFTA in the archive where someone in Epstein's circle writes, and quote, "Very intrigued by Neuralink. I wonder if there's a connection." But get this, remember how I told you to take a note earlier? Just last week, Meta was granted a patent, and the actual patent is for training an AI on everything you've ever posted, every comment, every DM, every voice message, so that it can simulate you after you die. The AI takes over your account. Epstein was funding the research, and now the tech companies are filing the patents. And let's finish off with this document. Epstein writing about someone who died. Socrates proves the immortality of the soul. I see her soul, very young, full of energy, getting ready to leave. I see people surrounded by their soul. So he believed in the soul. He obviously was spiritual to a certain degree. He believed he could survive the body, and he spent millions of dollars and over a decade trying to prove it. Whether he succeeded or not isn't the point. The point is the pipeline existed, the funding existed, the scientists existed, and the test subjects existed. All the documents have EFTA numbers and you can verify them for yourself.